Hi, Algebra 2 students. We're going to complete the second part of section 3.5 on completing the square. Today we're going to learn the process of completing the square and still use square roots to solve our problems. So let's get started. So I am on page 192 here, and in your textbook, and we're going to look at the first example, one example here. Let's look at something different than what the book has. Okay, and so what we're going to do to complete the square, the first step is to find b over 2. So I'm going to just write the steps off to the side here. So number 1, find b divided by 2. So that's going to be 22 divided by 2. Okay, so 22 divided by 2 is going to be 11. The second step in the process is to square what we got here. So we're going to square b over 2. So 11 squared is going to be 121. And then we're going to add 121 to both sides of our equation. So add to both sides. Okay, so we would just put plus 121 here. And so now we can factor that down into a perfect square binomial. So this will be x plus, well, the number that goes here is b over 2, so we're going to put 11 there. Okay, and then we can, that would be the factored form of that trinomial. Okay, and that's what you would circle for the perfect square there. All right, let's take a little step further where you're actually finding the roots here. And so let's practice one where you actually have to find x. So finding the roots. Okay, so let's say I have x squared plus minus 10x plus 24. And that's equal to 0. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move this constant over to the other side. So we get x squared minus 10x, and then I'm going to leave a space here, equals negative 24. Okay, so I'm going to complete the square. So half of negative 10 is negative 5. Negative 5 squared is 25. So I'm going to add 25 to both sides. So all I did was take b over 2, which is negative 10 over 2, which is a negative 5. And then negative 5 squared is 25. And so then I just took this 25 and I added it to both sides. And now we're going to factor this into a perfect square trinomial, and it's equal to 1. So this is going to be x minus 5 squared equals 1. So it's just like the previous lesson. We're going to take the square root of both sides now. So x minus 5 equals plus or minus 1. X equals 5 plus or minus 1. And then we're just going to work this out right here. So x is going to equal 6 and 4. And those will be your answers. Okay, let's try another example, and then we'll get into something a little bit harder. Okay, so let's try this one right here. Let's say I have x squared plus 6x plus 8 is 0. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move that 8 to the other side. Okay, I'm going to look at this 6 here, and I'm going to take half of 6, which is 3, and then I'm going to square it, and I'm going to add it to both sides. So it's going to be 9, okay, because 6 over 2 is 3, 3 squared is 9, and that's what I'm going to add to both sides. So this comes out to be x plus 3 quantity squared equals 1. And then we're just going to take the square root like we did before. So we get x plus 3 equals 1 plus or minus 1. X equals negative 3 plus or minus 1. And then you're going to work that out. It comes out to be a negative 4 and a negative 2. Once you work that out there. So, okay, so this is fine and perfect if there's a 1 in front of this x squared term, but there's always not going to be a 1 in front here, so we're going to look at a few examples where a doesn't equal 1. Okay, so I'm on the next page in your book, page 193, and we're going to look at something like this. 2x squared minus 7x plus 5. Okay, so there's a 2 in front, and what we need to be there is a 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide everything by 2. And now we'll have a 1 in front here. So it's minus 7 halves x plus 5 halves is 0. So now we can start the process, and we're going to move this 5 halves over. Okay, and then it's going to be the same kind of process. So it's going to be 7 halves times a half. That's b over 2. Is 7/4. Okay, and then we're going to square that. So we're going to add 49 over 16 to both sides of the equation. Okay, and then we're going to factor it down into the binomial squared. So this will be x minus. Okay, so it'll be the 7/4 here, which we want, which is half of our linear term. So it's 7/4 equals, well, then over here, I need to get a common denominator. So the common denominator is 16. So I'm going to multiply by 8 here. So we get a negative 40 over 16 plus 49 over 16. So that's going to be a negative 9 over 16. Okay, so we get down to x minus 7/4 quantity squared equals 9 over 16. Okay, and then I'm going to take this now, and I'm going to square root both sides. I'm going to find the answer. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next step. So I'm just going to recopy this so you can see it. Okay, so we're up at the top here, x minus 7/4 squared, and that's equal to 9 over 16. So we're going to square root both sides. So you get x minus 7/4 equals, and then the square root of 9 over 16, we'll put a plus and minus in front. This is 3/4. Okay, So all I did was just take the square root of both sides, and now I'm going to add that 7/4 over. And then you just go ahead and solve the problem. You can write it down into both of the roots. And then you're going to simplify, make sure you reduce your fractions. So over here, we're going to get 10/4, which reduces to 5/2. So that's one of the roots of our equation. And then over here, we're going to get 4/4, which is 1. And that'll be the second answer to our equation here. So whenever a is not equal to 1, you're going to start out by dividing every term by the coefficient, and then you'll get your answer and be able to work with it. Now, I know that a lot of you are not comfortable with fractions, but that's okay because we're just going to keep working on it. So, all right, we'll move to the next problem here that we have. And that's going to be, let's say we have a 3 in front here, 3x squared plus 10x minus 8. And that's equal to 0. Okay, so I noticed that I have a 3 here, so I'm going to take every term divided by 3 before I do anything on both sides. So this cancels, so I get x squared plus 10/3 x minus 8/3 is equal to 0. So I'm going to do the same thing that I've always been doing. I'm going to take b/2, so that's 10/3 times 1/2. So that's going to come out to be 10/6, which reduces to 5/3. Okay, and then I'm going to take 5/3, so I'm going to square it. So that comes out to be 25/9, and the 25/9 is what I'm going to add to both sides. Okay, so I get x squared plus 10/3 x. I'm going to move this 8/3 over, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the 25/9 to both sides. So it's plus 25/9 plus 25/9. And then you can go ahead and factor it into a perfect square binomial. This will be x. And remember, it's always going to be b/2 here, so it's going to be plus 5/3. Quantity squared equals, and then I have to get a common denominator, so I'm going to multiply by 3. So then I'll have 24 plus 25 all over 9. So x plus 5/3 squared equals 49/9. Let's write this a little bit better here. Okay, so then to find the answer, I'm just going to take the square root of each side. So I think you have enough room. I think you can see it over here. So let's just work it out up here. So I'm going to have x plus 5/3 squared equals 49/9. I'm going to square root each side. So it's going to be x plus 5/3 equals plus and minus 7/3, because the square root of 49 is 7 and the square root of 9 is 3. And so it's going to come out to be a negative 5/3 plus or minus 7/3. And then we just work that out and reduce our answer here. So this is the second part here. So x is going to equal 2/3, and x is going to equal a negative 12/3. Well, that comes out to be a negative 4. So your answer is 2/3 and a negative 4. So this is the end of the lesson. Tomorrow we'll be working on getting our quadratic equation into vertex form so we can graph it, and then I'll have you do some practice graphs. So I'll see you later. Hope everything is going well. Talk to you soon.